Hello, and thank you for joining us for your weekly star on top of the Christmas tree of electric car knowledge. Too soon, Tom, for Christmas? Too
I think it
soon?
is. It
Okay,
is in my book. Yeah,
okay. It's almost in fact, it is December. It is the start of December. So actually, come on, don't be
I know.
grumpy.
I know.
Anyway, today we are mainly going to be discussing the car that broke the internet once again, along with seven-seat EVs and, of course, the dreaded ZEV mandate. Plus, we'll be answering your questions and dipping into the postbag to find out what you've had to say this week. And there's been an awful lot said about Jaguar, unsurprisingly. Welcome to the Kilowatt Half Hour. I am Ginny.
And I'm Tom.
How you doing, Tom?
I'm all right. I've been away a lot. I've been doing things. I
You've
haven't
been
been at
all
my desk,
over.
which is quite strange. I have. Yeah.
And more on that later and more on where we've been later. But there's been such a massive postbag in response to the podcast last week about the Jaguar rebrand. So I feel like we should just talk about this at the top and let's get some of these comments out there because we've had so much I literally can't tell you. Um, I think Nicola was completely nailed it for me when she just said,
Mm,
irrespective of what you think of the car, an awful lot of that backlash has been absolutely dreadful, and it's made
mm,
a lot of us very, very cross. And actually, I've had a couple of really quite disappointing conversations, one of which yesterday with a fellow journalist who were kind of echoing that kind of stuff. Lots of words like woke and, not reading the anti-woke backlash and I just think it's all irrelevant. Like it or
mm,
don't like it, but that is not a reason to dislike it. And I think some of the comments that I've read and some of the homophobic stuff, the anti-LGBTQ community stuff has just been really hideous. And I feel for the brand manager that has been in a lot of videos who has been doorstepped, don't know if you're aware, behind.
yeah.
Yeah, and I just think stop this. Stop it right now. It is completely irrelevant. These people are doing a job and there is no excuse. And yeah, there's a couple of people in the industry that have surprised me, actually. I'm not going to name names, but it's been a bit disappointing, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's been this big backlash, and I think there is a knee-jerk reaction to these things, and then it'll all go away and people get used to it until people see the car, of course, when it's all going to kick off again. But maybe that will, I don't know, temper
Yeah.
reaction to the car. I don't know.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it places the car quite well.
Yeah, it doesn't. And yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah.
No, just because it's going to be a controversial design, and the controversy around everything else, I think has placed it well. People will be like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, we get it now,
Yeah.
because it's gonna spark discussion, isn't it? That car.
Well, from what we've seen so far in the bit of drip feeds that we've had, and if you've missed some of there was the branding and the logos came out about a week ago, and then over the weekend, the last week we've seen just little shots of like the rear three quarters, haven't we, where it looks
Mm,
potentially like it might not have a rear windscreen, and then we've seen sort of digital cameras on the side hidden in these brass plaques. Um, I've seen the car. I have to be really careful what I say because I've signed my life away, and if I say too much, I'll probably find myself homeless. But we will see it very soon. And actually, I think what I can say from when we went up for the briefings on that car, which I did a few weeks ago, they absolutely are acknowledging that this is going to get people talking. And if you're going to rebrand a company, that's what you've got to do, isn't it? So they've certainly succeeded in that. Should we do some
mm.
comments? Because we've had some
Yeah.
brilliant comments in. I'm having to read things off my phone because my Mac is broken, everyone, so I'm struggling a bit today. But there's one comment that came in that really, for me, sums up, I think, how all of us feel, but also lots of other comments that have come in. And it's from the Stars in His Head on YouTube, and it says, Nicola, I didn't think I could love you any more than I already do. We all think that about Nicola on the team. But I was genuinely moved by your support for the community and your disgust and anger at these vile homophobic trolls. Thank you and kiss. And we've had so many in along those veins, haven't we? And I
Yeah,
think,
we have.
yeah, and just to echo that from all of us as well, it's we're completely in agreement. It's just it's a car, it's a branding. Calm yourselves down, everybody.
There's one from that made me chuckle from Hello Balula One, who says, as a non-stereotypical Jag owner, I'm bi, mixed race, and I've got an I-Pace at 27.
Well
The
done,
last
you.
thing I would have wanted was that advert.
Ah.
Not only do I have to answer questions about what's broken on my car and why it's in the garage this time, but I have to answer questions on the advert too. All the company had to do was produce interesting, reliable, and fun cars. I mean,
Yeah.
talking about Jaguar, and they're doing all the branding thing, they do need to get the quality right, don't they? It's just, hopefully they will.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's it. I mean, and those opinions are brilliant and they're great, and it has provoked a lot of those. Albert Topperus 04 said, my objection to the Jag ad is more a general point about many ads and branding exercises, is that the campaign appears totally divorced from the actual product. I've lost count of the number of ads I've seen that tell me sweet FA about the product. And that's very true, but I think if you look at the timeline, I think everybody got kind of quite het up about the film. I agree, but I think it was more that was just about setting the scene that this is going to be
Yeah.
colourful and exuberant and probably different.
Yeah, well, the next comment from Gruff Silly Goat was the same sort of thought of me, which he says, to be fair, I believe the Jaguar advert is just being honest. High-priced premium cars are just fashion accessories, so why not advertise them like other high perception value goods? So if you think about, you don't see a perfume advert and it says, smells of sandalwood, or you don't see, I don't know, a very expensive coat. I don't know what, Hugo Boss or something, and it says keeps you warm in winter. It doesn't do that. It's just got somebody attractive wearing it, and you think, oh, well, I kind of connect with that, or I want to be like that. It's aspirational. So I suppose that's the same thing, isn't it? They're just setting the scene of what they think they stand for.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of the backlash has been from this perception that the classic Jag owners are not going to like this and it's alienating people. And we had a really interesting comment from Ogry Boy, who said, having been invited to JLR HQ to display my ex-JSC over 2 days as part of a heritage link along with other owners from the 80s and 90s for the new launch, the enthusiasm from staff and management was overwhelming, especially when able to discuss the I-Pace, which I also own as a modern comparison. They have not forgotten their heritage, but realised the need to return to their roots of aspirational individual vehicles of quality and higher than average prices. I'm encouraged, and the white noise of the bigots and those that have never put a penny towards the brand will receive. I'm really looking forward to it as a fan and owner, and an EV and classic fan. Roll on 2nd of December, Miami. And you know what, I would absolutely love it if you could get in touch with us after the 2nd when you've seen the car and let us know what you think of it. Because I think that it's just a really interesting comment, that, and they're obviously, by inviting all those owners in, and they've done a lot of workshopping on this as well, and they've spoken to a lot of current owners. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, I think.
I think there are a load of cars out next week, Tom, that we can't talk about, aren't there? You've been really busy.
I think we can probably talk about them existing. We just can't give any details of them. So I think next week we're going to see the Ford Puma electric, aren't we? I think the embargo on that's lifting next week.
Yes, we can talk about that. Yes, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The Audi A6, I've driven it, and that will be out next week. So you'll be able to read the review and see the video, I think.
We will. It is next week, but you're not allowed to say yet what you think of it.
No. Well, I can't say how it drives, but I mean, we've seen the figures on it, and I was quite excited about that car because the range on it's over 400 miles, substantially over 400 miles. It's like 460 miles, and it charges at 270 kilowatts. So I worked out in my head, I haven't done this, that you could almost get Land's End to John O'Groats on one charge, which would take 27 minutes, but you're about 60 miles short. So I reckon what was far more realistic, 2 15-minute charges. You could do Land's End to John O'Groats, or you could do more than 3 weeks without charging with an average mileage. Yeah. I mean, that's nuts.
It's nuts, isn't it? And that's going to be so key, isn't it, for all those people who can't charge at home. So we know around 40% of the UK can't. And of course, this is really expensive technology now, but the closer we get to 2030, and when that ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel, we think, is coming into play again, just ranges, that will be a more of a commonplace range. You know, the prices
Yeah.
will come down, cars will charge faster. So we've got to adjust that mentality from, got to fill my car up, you know.
Oh,
Oh, is
sorry.
that it? It's all right. Oh,
There's always a dog barking in
there's
our
always a
podcast, isn't
dog.
there?
Mine's asleep. I'm amazed he's not barking at it. Ziggy's asleep under the desk. What's he barking at?
Postman, probably.
Postman, good boy. Well done. Well done. Anyway, yes. So it is. It'd be interesting to see how it fares in the real world. In winter
Yeah.
driving, we're coming back to that,
I
aren't we?
think I think that the interesting thing about that car for me is that at the moment, if we're doing a long journey, you go, well, I can drive to Edinburgh in that car and it's fine. But where it gets really interesting is I can drive to, I don't know, Leeds and back and then charge at home again where it's cheap. So I'm not having to do one of those top-ups. I'm not having to find an overnight charger or something. So to be able to charge at home just brings that cost down enormously for those. Doing there and backs without having to charge at your destination is going to save a lot of money, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So go on. What else have you been driving? What else can we not talk about? Anything else?
There's a Mazda that I can't talk about for a long time.
All right. There's a. I know you've been to see a Diaz. Can we talk about that yet, or is that still under embargo?
That's still under embargo until next week as well. But that's that's an interesting car. That's one to look at. I mean, DS. It's not a brand generally everybody gets terribly excited about, but this is a divisively styled car, and the range and efficiency made some people from Audi look a bit, I wouldn't say worried, they just raised an eyebrow.
It's interesting though, because we touched on the podcast last week about Nicola was talking about the efficiency of the E3008 that she is running, which is a Stellantis car, which wasn't the best. And I'm in an E5008. I haven't had a chance to drive that yet, so that's coming this week for me to try. I filmed a walk around video of it, but I didn't do the launch. And it's got 73 kilowatt hour battery. The range, the WLTP official range for city driving is somewhere 319 to 461. The combined range on that car 310. Obviously, it's been cold the last few days, but I'm getting 200 miles out of it. And that's not just motorway driving. That's been a combination of motorway and local around town as well. It's a big dip, that. And I think we've seen generally that, perhaps Stellantis cars aren't necessarily the most efficient, are they? Go on, you'll prove me wrong.
Well,
now.
You say that, but
Astra. You're going to say Astra?
I've taken over.
Are you going to say
well,
Astra?
Yeah.
Well,
I've taken over the Astra, and I've just done a load of miles in, and I plugged it in when I first got it, and it was saying 256 miles, which I think is pretty close to the official range. And I was like, well, it's not going to do that. And it did, but it was quite mild. And then today I've been driving it, and it's 1 degree out there, and it's saying 230 miles, and it's averaging 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour, which is really good.
Yeah, whereas Nicola and I reckon we've been getting like 2.3, 2.4 miles per kilowatt hour.
I wonder if it's just is it like twin motor yours? I don't know. That combination of that's in the Astra and some of the other cars of that 51, 52 kilowatt hour battery with the new motor that's in things like the Jeep Avenger and the new Astra and the newer versions of the Corsa and the Mocha and things. I don't know. Maybe that's the dream combo, but they seem really efficient because it's it's got as much range as my old Lexus, which had a 70 kilowatt hour battery, and this has got a 50. So if I'm doing that extra kilowatt hour, extra miles per kilowatt hour, it's going to actually save me money. It's
Nick was saying the same because she's done that swap with you, and we know that the Astra was. So maybe it's like you say, it depends on the combinations you go for, and if you're going for the dual motors, perhaps it just is that extra push that reduces it. But I mean, I've only been driving it around for a few days. I'll wait until I've had it for the full week before I say too much. But I think it's been an interesting exercise. So go on. What else?
Yeah, there are some cars. There's some cars you've seen that you can talk about, which is probably more interesting for everyone.
Actually, seen and driven one I couldn't for a while. The Ioniq 9, which has been a bit divisive. Lots of comments that people think it looks very Volvo-esque, which I've got to say I agree with. I really like the way it looks. It's really hard, isn't it? Because the group's already got the Kia EV9. Current World Car of the Year. It's been quite a big hit, that car. And I think they had to do something different. And I like it. I think it looks quite sleek and elegant, as sleek as a massive, block of steel travelling through the air is ever going to look. But I think it does. I think it's quite eye-catching. I love all the light bars. I love the pixels on it. It's got a really nice interior. Such a kind of weird to talk about a car's interior being calming. But have you even sat in some cars and they do just kind of make you feel like, oh, and it's got that kind of vibe. The seats are really comfy. Now, I had an early drive of a prototype, which was a bit weird because we'd already seen the car the day before and filmed a walk around video. Then I went out to Hyundai's test track in the Mojave Desert, spectacular place. And the car was all disguised inside and out, but we'd like to have seen it the day before. So everything was disguised. So I was driving this car and literally the only thing I could see inside was the steering wheel. So I didn't even know what speed we were doing, which is quite hard to assess a car when you're not actually sure how fast you're going. But the ride, if I have to sum it up in one word, I would say it is relaxing. And that was what the engineers talked about a lot before they sent us out to drive these prototypes. They've been really trying to get and engineer this sort of very comfortable, relaxing drive. And they've absolutely nailed that. Suspension is lovely on it. It's got some upgrades to the suspension that will go on to the Kia EV9 when that gets an upgrade. I think it drives slightly nicer than the EV9 actually. There's a bit of a hint of the weight. They haven't said what the weight is yet, but going into corners, you do feel it a little bit. But generally, I thought the setup was lovely. It handled really nicely. Ride was very comfortable and smooth. So yeah, I think that car does bode really well. So yeah, I don't know, what did you think of it? What have you thought about how it looks?
Well, I like the sound of the relaxing drive bit.
Yeah, you'd love it. Yeah,
an old fogey now. Yeah. I thought that I was a little disappointed by the looks. I think that I really like the new Santa Fe, the way that looks. I think it's an interesting looking car. I thought this was perhaps a little generic compared to the Kia. That I was listening to somebody the other day who reckons that Kia and Hyundai one of them has to do boring and one of them has to do interesting on each platform. So the Ioniq 5 was really interesting. The EV6 was a bit dull. Do you
think? I actually think the EV6 is one of my favourite cars. I really like the way it looks. But I guess that depends where you're coming from. So we've got Mike on the team who always loves the kind of slightly quirkier. I get what you mean. They're trying to do slightly quirkier with Hyundai, aren't they? So their designer Sang-Yup Lee talks a lot about how he's creating a chessboard with pieces as opposed to the Russian doll approach. So each of his cars has a very distinct feel, and you can see they're linked because they all have those lovely pixelated lights and the light bar. But other than that, they're very individual. And I think whoever said that to you, it's the approach they're going for. But I don't know. I don't think the EV6 is boring. I don't think you can call it boring.
Well, I suppose not conventional, maybe. I suppose there's then like the Sorento, which is conventional, versus the Santa Fe, which is radical. Yeah. And then there's EV9, which is slightly crazy. And then the Ioniq 9, which is perhaps a little less divisive. It's an interesting theory.
It is an interesting theory. But I kind of thought that Hyundai were meant to be the quirkier ones.
Anyway. Maybe.
But there was also out there I drove that Car in LA, and then I was out there for World Car of the Year driving last week, which was brilliant. Drove loads of cars. Actually, that's what I must talk about this. I've not chatted about it. So I drove the Polestar 3 for the first time.
Nice, isn't it?
Really nice. I was actually quite taken aback at just how nicely it drives. And I drove the EX90, and actually I think I prefer how the Polestar 3 drives to the EX90.
I suppose it's not 7 seats, is it? So they can make it a bit lower. They can take some of the weight out of it. I really like that car.
Absolutely. I also drove the Macan electric for the first time. Both the standard version, the 4, and also the turbo. Honestly, such a good car. I mean, it drives beautifully. And what was interesting was that I was getting in and out of some combustion engine cars and into electric. And actually, the Macan, honestly, as a sports car, of how it handles, how it's set up, how that electric power suits, those really lovely winding roads that we were driving the cars on. I think it's a brilliant machine. I think it's beautifully done. So yeah, so that was exciting. But one of the cars that didn't drive, but we saw in LA, was the EV9 GT. So they've done what they did with the EV6, stuck a GT on it, given it an extra boost of horsepower. It's got dual motors with pumping out quite a lot of power, and it's going to get from the Ioniq 5N, you know, the fake gearbox and all the sounds and the gear shifts. It's going to get that. That's going to go into it as well. And actually, that's going into the EV6 GT as well. And that system is a lot of fun. So yeah, but it's going to be the most expensive car Kia have ever sold when it hits next year. It's going to be £80,000.
I can't say that excites me very much, an EV9 GT. I can see
Yeah.
big SUV sports cars.
Really? Do you not? You're not? Yeah, no, not. Don't fancy a 160 kilowatt motor in the front and a 270 kilowatt motor in the rear, producing 500 horsepower. Not really your thing.
But buy a sports car and a normal 7-seater. That'd be my advice.
What did strike me was that it's 0 to 60 times 4.3 seconds, and you don't want to be doing that when you've got all the kids in the car and they've just had their breakfast, do you? Not with all those 7 seats loaded up. That'd be awful. Could get really messy. Very much for the it's a niche car, very much for the American market. I will quite enjoy driving it though. I'm quite looking forward to that. Okay, right. What else? Go on.
Shall I do my bargain of the week?
Oh yeah, do your bargain of the week. Go on. What have you got?
Well, it's back to our Stellantis cars really, because once again it's Vauxhall at the top. So a Mokka GS, which is mid-range, £222 a month.
Yeah.
Now that's £3 a month cheaper than the equivalent Corsa. And an Astra is 250. Now the Astra has the newer motor and gear battery, so you might save that if we're looking at our new efficiency. But if otherwise, a Mokka, £222 is quite tempting. I mean, Leafs are still dirt cheap.
But Leafs are great if you don't need to go far. It was 180 miles, isn't it, on the Leaf? And that Mokka, and we've all spent a bit of time in the Mokka. I like the Mokka as a car. It's just not massively efficient, is it?
No, it's not. I think one with the new motor would be much nicer, but obviously they're clearing out the stocks of the old one. It's people who are clearing out stocks is where the bargains are, isn't it?
Absolutely. And do you know, it's interesting, that leads in quite nicely into a question we've had in about the ZEV mandate, because we've talked about this. This is the mandate, if you don't know, it's the mandate that's been brought in the UK, and it's to set a timeline for manufacturers to ensure they're selling the right numbers of electric cars to get to reach the point when we ban the sale of new petrol and diesel cars here in the UK. And also it provides a framework for charging companies to work to as well, because you can't have one without the other, and these companies are investing billions and billions of pounds ahead of time into infrastructure, so they need you need the two to work together really. Anyway, it's been quite controversial. This year car makers have got to sell 22% of their cars, of their overall car sales need to be electric. They get fined £15,000 per car that they miss, and they can buy credits from other cars as car makers. There's a few other ways around it that can offset the overall emissions of the total sales and get credits for that, but it's quite controversial. But when we've talked about it early in the year, Tom, we were saying there will be bargains. When you get into the final few months of 2024, there will be bargains, and there are bargains, aren't there?
There are lots of bargains from some of the companies who are panicking, and they don't want to pay the fine, and they don't want to have to buy credits because if they're going to have to pay £12,000 in to buy a credit or the fine, then they might as well just discount the car to get the EV credit.
And the interesting thing with the credits is, of course, if you oversell, so if you're in the fortunate position of MGR, for example, who we were both with last week, and they're saying that 27% of their sales will be electric this year, and they only had to hit 22. They've got some there they can sell. Tesla, all electric. A lot of brands will be in that position. You're in this weird position where you're having to pay a fine, effectively, even though it's not a fine, it's buying a credit to one of your rivals, which is really tricky, isn't it, to get your head around that? I think it's really problematic.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing, isn't it? And the MG guy, literally guy,
guy
who's the
from
boss of
MG.
MG, was talking about how it's a little unfair on some of the manufacturers like Mazda, because part of the credit is if you have an improvement in the CO2 performance of your petrol and diesel cars. And Mazda had some very efficient petrol cars a few years ago, and it's difficult to improve on that. Whereas some of the other manufacturers who had filthy petrol engines, because they've shown an improvement, that they get some benefit there. It's all very complicated.
It's very complicated. I mean, there is a review happening, but we had a great question in from Andrew Cowell via email. And the email, by the way, is podcast@electrifying.com if you want to drop us an email. If not, you can drop comments and questions in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. So Andrew asks, I'm looking to buy Renault Megane in the next few weeks, months. With the Z mandate, do you think it would be a good idea to wait until nearer to the end of the year in case they've not reached their targets? And if so, how late would you leave it? I was thinking of maybe Sunday the 8th of December or the 15th. Could that be too late? Ooh, it's a good question, isn't it? It's the balance, isn't it? The juggling.
Yeah, I took a picture of the chart yesterday at this MG thing about, and we'll see how Renault are doing.
Renault are not doing well. I know that for sure, for a fact.
Oh, they're not, are they?
They're really not doing well. Renault are way below. So on the one hand, you could say, yes, they will be desperate to shift EVs. You get some good deals. On the other hand, this is something we know some car makers are doing. They're restricting supply of their petrol and diesel models. So they don't have to sell as many, because they'd rather sell less of those than pay the fines or buy credits.
Shall I say that the manufacturers who I think might be in a bit of a pickle?
Yes, go on.
And how to do something. So Land Rover's not looking great.
Oh, no, they don't have any electric cars.
No, Ford, Toyota,
Nissan.
Volkswagen. Nissan's it's not. Oh yeah, that is bad. Yeah,
they're bad.
Kia should be fine.
Kia will be fine.
Skoda, surprisingly.
I'll tell you the ones who I know are good: BMW, Audi, Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes. They're not worrying. BYD aren't worrying. MG aren't worrying. But I think going back to Renault, they're not in great shape, are they, when it comes to the Z mandate? So
no.
I think, to me, if I was you, Andrew, I would go in and I would haggle hard on that car. You've got absolutely nothing to lose. I think probably wouldn't leave it. And I don't know, would you leave it till January, or would you try and get one in before the end of the year?
No, I think they'd want it registered before the end of the year, wouldn't they?
Yeah. So I reckon, your Sundays in December are going to be busy, because you'll be haggling in the Renault dealerships. Good car though. Good choice.
Talking of haggling in dealerships, David Fowles got in touch and said, once I took the leap to go electric, I arranged test drives of 6 different EVs over the course of a month. Hats off to Skoda and Ford, who pretty much tossed me the keys and said, bring it back before we close tonight. And I drove all over the place. Some of the others were a bit reluctant to do more than a token effort, but when you turn to leave and tell them you're not shelling out 40 to 50 grand based on a drive around the block, they often give you an hour or two.
That's brilliant. That is so. Well, I mean, you can get extended test drives. I know Mini do it, BMW, quite a few brands. You can book a car for a weekend, but that's just great to go in and just say, there you go, off you go for the rest of the day, and it is what you need to do. And I think we look at we do a lot of research, don't we, with non-EV drivers to find out what their attitudes are, and we know that even now, we've just had some results back recently. Just around 50% of people still don't feel as confident at just the thought of driving an electric car as they do as a petrol or diesel. It's really understandable. It's new technology. You get lots of people talking about the speed and the torque and how quick and nippy they are. That could seem quite daunting to some people. So I think that idea of actually getting in one for a few hours, that's what you need to do. You need to feel it and see what it feels like. Feel the regenerative braking.
Yeah, well, David doesn't mention what he chose in the end, so I'm quite interested. Presumably it was the Skoda or the Ford.
Oh, go on, tell us, David, please. Yeah. Let us know.
Yeah.
Drop us an email again and let us know what you bought and also what you think of it as well. Okay, I've got one here. Guinness is good for you. Guinness is good for you. It's quite good, actually. I had a Guinness, actually, not that long ago. It's very nice. I haven't drunk Guinness in ages. Anyway, regarding insurance, I took a Renault Megane E-Tech for a test drive last month, and I loved it. So when I got home, I hit the comparison websites to see how bad the conversion from ICE, a Suzuki Swift, just drove the new Suzuki Swift actually last week. It was very good. To EV would be. Lo and behold, there was only a £45 difference. 165 to 210, fully comprehensive, 9 years, no claims. Needless to say, we're now in the market for our first EV, waiting to see if Renault upgrade the screen on the Megane to the larger one as fitted in Europe on the 25 model. Loved the show, although when it's just the girls, it's a bit like watching Loose Women, lol. I think it's a bit like watching Loose Women when you're on as well, Tom. They have male panellists on Loose Women.
Well, I think that the Swift to a Megane is quite more anyway. Even if it was a petrol Golf or something, I'm sure it would be about 45 quid. It was interesting, the insurance last week. The chat that was saying that insuring a learner on the cars was going to be £10,000. I think you just need to shop around a bit there, because I mean, I know there are certain companies who do not want to insure learners or young people, and they'll just a bit like when you have a builder in and he doesn't fancy the job, so he quotes you 100 grand for painting a window. You know he's not going to do it. So there are some insurers who will just do a ridiculous quote because they don't want to go anywhere near you.
Yeah.
So I think you just need to shop around and check what you're doing. I've got my son's learned to drive, and I just do it on a kind of pay as you go basis, and it's
good.
20 quid a day or something. Yeah.
I did a programme on this from ITV Tonight earlier this year. We're looking at insurance premiums, which of course, as we know, have gone through the roof, and loads of different reasons for that. Interestingly, one of which is a shortage of trained mechanics to fix cars. So they're just off the road longer. People are in loan cars longer. Cars are getting written off that don't need to do, so it's all bumping prices up. But one of the interesting tips we got on that was to go early with your insurance as well. So they track, and the closer you get to your date of renewal, the more it'll go up. So actually there's a sort of, I can't remember there's an exact number of days, but it was basically go early, don't leave it to the last minute. And the other thing, like you said, was for younger drivers, shop around, because you just have to put everything out there, and you will invariably come back with a huge. We did some research with some consumers, and the difference people were getting quoted for the same car is quite shocking, really. So you just have to put the phone bashing in, don't you, or the internet bashing, as it is these days.
Yeah.
Okay, what else we got? Do you want to do
Richard Jackson 139? Yeah. Well, it's about insurance again. So it'd be great if you could list EV insurance group and comparisons between different manufacturers and models. My iX3 went up £200 this year and £300 a year after. No change in circumstances. It's just crazy as battery costs are coming down, etc. How can they justify the price rises? Oh, your channel and podcasts are fantastic. Thank you. So yeah, again, just shop around. I mean, whenever we renew, and my poor dad who doesn't like doing much of the online stuff, I have to go and do it for him. And even if you go back to the original broker and just say I've had a quote £200 less, then they just match it. It's crazy.
They ultimately
really.
want they want the business, don't they? They just rely on the fact that we're all so busy, and we also find these kind of jobs a bit tedious and challenging too. So you just have to kind of force yourself to keep going with it. So I've got one here that I want to read out. Matthew Tyler Jones 8317 messaged us on YouTube to say, we went to look at a Buzz when I realised it would be within our reach. Now, this was your Barnard's bargain of the week, wasn't it, last week? Do we know, actually, by the way, if Electrifying Mike has gone to look at the Buzz? Because he was watching the prices come down on the Buzz, and he had a point where if it reached a certain point, he was going to be tempted. Have you spoken to him about it?
Yeah, I haven't spoken to him about it. I think he kind of thinks, I'm the evil devil on his shoulder telling him to go and buy a Buzz, so he wants me to stop sending him cheap Buzz deals.
Well, he might want to read this, because Matthew said they went to look at the Buzz, but the problem was the dealer also sold Skoda. And we thought the Enyaq was not just better value, but also just better. Matthew,
I think I agree. I'm not.
What excellent taste you have, Matthew.
I'm not a big Buzz fan, am I? So I would agree that it's much more efficient. It's probably just as big in the back, isn't it? I don't know.
Do you know what it is? I mean, I adore the Buzz. It's completely polarised as numbers of us on the team. You don't like it. I love it. Nikki's not too keen. Nicola likes it. Mike loves it. I just love it. I love it for its quirkiness. I actually think it's really nice to drive. I think for a while, until we got the ID4 and the ID7, it was probably the nicest driving VW electric car. It certainly, I think, it was nice to drive than the ID3. So I think it's lovely to drive. I think it looks brilliant. I just think as a car to live with day to day, the Enyaq is just such a nice piece of kit. As we know, I haven't talked about it from the podcast for a few weeks, but I've got to mention it. I'm not sponsored by them. I just genuinely love that car. We all have cars that we love for no reason. You like your Lexuses and your Toyotas. I like my Enyaq.
Yeah, true.
So, should we wrap up this episode of Loose Women?
I suppose we should. Yeah? We've gone over again. Yeah, we've done everything. We've done the post bag.
You didn't hear what I said then, did you? Should we wrap up this
episode? I did. I just chose to ignore. I chose to ignore it. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I like the idea of you as a loose woman, Tom. And we're going to get us all sat behind a desk next time with our cups of tea. The Electrifying Loose Women.
I think I'm going to have to watch Loose Women because it's not a programme I'm terribly familiar with. So perhaps it's a bigger insult than I realise.
It's an insult at all. Anyway, thank you as always for your comments and your emails. Please do keep them coming. It's podcast@electrifying.com. If you're watching on YouTube, you can drop a comment in the comments below. And if you are listening on your podcast platform, please do follow us and subscribe and drop us a comment and a rating or share us and all of that stuff because it helps us to grow the podcast. But for now, from all of us, well, from both of us, goodbye, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.